think the subject which will be of most importance politically is mass psychology. Mass psychology is, scientifically speaking, not a very advanced study. This study is immensely useful to practical men, whether they wish to become rich or to acquire the government. It is, of course, as a science, founded upon individual psychology, but hitherto it has employed rule-of-thumb methods which were based upon a kind of intuitive common sense. Its importance has been enormously increased by the growth of modern methods of propaganda. Of these, the most influential is what is called education. Religion plays a part, though a diminishing one. The press, the cinema and the radio play an increasing part. Bertrand Russell, 1952.
Mass psychology. From the scientific outlook, there is, however, a large amount of genuine experimental science in social affairs. Perhaps the most important set of experiments in this realm is that which we owe to advertisers. This material, valuable as it is, has not been utilized by experimental psychologists, because it belongs to a region remote from the universities, and they would feel themselves vulgarized by contact with anything so gross. But anybody who is in earnest in studying the psychology of belief cannot do better than consult the great advertising firms. No test of belief is so searching as the financial one. When a man is willing to back his belief by spending money in accordance with it, his belief must be regarded as genuine. Now this is precisely the test which the advertiser is perpetually applying. Various people's soaps are recommended in various ways. Some of these ways produce the desired result, others do not, or at any rate not to the same degree. Clearly the advertisement which causes a man's soap to be bought is more effective in creating belief than the one which does not. I do not think any experienced advertiser would suggest that the merits of the respective soaps had any share whatever in bringing about the result. Very large sums of money are paid to the men who invent good advertisements, and rightly so, for the power to cause large numbers of people to believe what you assert is a very valuable power. Consider its importance, for example, to the founders of religions. In the past they often had to adopt the most painful forms of publicity. How much pleasanter their lives would have been if they could have gone to an agent who would have purchased the respect of their disciples in return for a percentage on the ecclesiastical revenues. From the technique of advertising it seems to follow that in the great majority of mankind any proposition will win acceptance if it is reiterated in such a way as to remain in the memory. Most of the things that we believe because we have heard them affirmed. We do not remember where or why they were affirmed, and we are therefore unable to be critical even when the affirmation was made by a man whose income would be increased by its acceptance and was not backed by any evidence whatever. Advertisements tend, therefore, as the technique becomes perfected, to be less and less argumentative, and more merely striking. So long as an impression is made, the desired result is achieved. Considered scientifically, advertisements have another great merit, which is that their effects, so far as is known through the receipts of the advertisers, are mass effects, not effects upon individuals, so that the data acquired are data as to mass psychology. For the purposes of studying society rather than individuals, advertisements are therefore invaluable. Unfortunately, their purpose is practical rather than scientific. For scientific purposes I suggest the following experiment. Let two soaps, A and B, be manufactured, of which A is excellent and B abominable. Let A be advertised by stating its chemical composition and by testimonials from eminent chemists. Let B be advertised by the bare statement that it is the best, accompanied by the portraits of famous Hollywood beauties. If man is a rational animal, more of A will be sold than of B. Does anyone, in fact, believe that this would be the result? The advantages of advertisement have come to be realized pretty fully by politicians, but are only beginning to be realized by the churches. When the churches become more fully alive to its advantages as compared with the traditional religious technique which dates from before the invention of printing, we may hope for a great revival of faith. On the whole, the Soviet government and the communist religion are those which hitherto have best understood the use of advertisement. They are, it is true, somewhat hampered by the fact that most Russians cannot read. This obstacle, However, they are doing their best to remove education as propaganda. This consideration brings us naturally to the subject of education, which is the second great method of public propaganda. Education has two very different purposes. On the one hand, it aims at developing the individual and giving him knowledge which will be useful to him. On the other hand, it aims at producing citizens who will be convenient for the state or the church which is educating them. Up to a point, these two purposes coincide in practice. It is convenient to the state that citizens should be able to read, and that they should possess some technical skill in virtue of which they are able to do productive work. It is convenient that they should possess sufficient moral character to abstain from unsuccessful crime, and sufficient intelligence to be able to direct their own lives. But when we pass beyond these elementary requirements, the interests of the individual may often conflict with those of the state or the church. This is especially the case in regard to credulity. To those who control publicity, credulity is an advantage, while to the individual a power of critical judgment is likely to be beneficial. Consequently, the state does not aim at producing a scientific habit of mind, except in a small minority of experts, who are well paid, and therefore, as a rule, supporters of the status quo. Among those who are not well paid, credulity is more advantageous to the state. Consequently, children in school are taught what they are told and are punished if they express disbelief. In this way, a conditioned reflex is established, leading to a belief in anything said authoritatively by elderly persons of importance. You and I, reader, owe out immunity from spoliation to this beneficent precaution on the part of our respective governments. One of the purposes of the state in education is certainly, on the whole, beneficent. The purpose in question is that of producing social coherence. In medieval Europe, as in modern China, the lack of social coherence proved disastrous. It is difficult for large masses of men to cooperate as much as is necessary for their own welfare. The tendency to anarchy and civil war is always one to be guarded against, except on those rare occasions when some great principle is at stake which is of sufficient importance to make civil war worthwhile. For this reason, that part of education which aims at producing loyalty to the state is to be praised insofar as it is directed against internal anarchy. But insofar as it is directed to the perpetuation of international anarchy, it is bad. On the whole, at present in education, the form of loyalty to the state which is most emphasized is hostility to its enemies.